It's not a question of whether the college football playoff is expanding again or whether they're going to rework it again. It's going to happen, guys. I don't like it. Apparently, many of you now all of a sudden don't like it. Welcome. Welcome to the party that no one wanted to attend. But it's going to happen. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time whining and complaining about it. I did that in bed last night. I called my mom. I'll write to pen pals. Whoever will listen to me whine and complain, that's where I do my whining and complaining about playoff expansion. But seeing that it's going to happen, and seeing as how I would love to one day be the commissioner of this great sport of ours, I feel like I owe it to you to answer your questions about what I do. Which of these formats would work? And believe it or not, I have come down on a side pretty substantially that I think would be best here. But I want you to hear me loud and clear before I go down this road. Is everyone listening? I hate all of it. I hate this all. I wrote it in all caps on my notes just so I remembered. So I'm about to present some ideas to you. This is not my perfect world. This is like the realistic world. This is like student council circa fourth grade. No one was running that I liked. None of them were my friends. I just voted for the one I hated least. So I'm trying to settle on the format here that I hate the least. Now, a little backstory, 20-second version for those of you who have been living your lives or you just don't like this stuff. God bless you, by the way. You're more like me than you could ever know, even though I'm leading my show with this. The Big Ten and the SEC met in New Orleans this week. One of my favorite lines from any of the reports from these meetings was that both conferences made sure they had lawyers present to dispel any potential idea that they were colluding. Okay, well, there's that. I guess that's all you need, a couple of lines in a national story. And that's it. We're satisfied that you're not colluding. So, I mean, whomst amongst us would ever accuse the two of doing such a thing? So, what's going to happen as soon as 2026, in all likelihood, is you're going to get a revamped playoff. It's going to go to 14 teams or 16 teams. That's not the question. A couple of you came in the comments after last show and said, oh, I don't think this is coming. It's not a question of that, guys. I wish it was. I wish we were going backwards. But it's not. So this is going to happen. It's not my opinion. It's just a matter of opinion of which way it's going to go. But we're going this direction. So few ideas have been floated out there, right? You could go to 14 teams. You could go to 16 teams. That's not the biggest point of contention. Really, the biggest point of contention is what the format is. There is one school of thought that if you go to 14 teams or 16 teams, whatever the number is, you just take the top 14 teams, seed them, and go about your business in the playoff. Sounds simple enough. In a previous life, that is the side that I would have landed on. But I've thought about it. And much like hope, thought can be a dangerous thing. And I've had a lot of idle time lately. And so when left to my own devices, I can come up with some sick stuff for college football. And I have. I've got some stuff written on this piece of paper that had you told me 5 years ago I would be presenting on a show, I would ask, which penitentiary are we broadcasting from? What has happened to me? Who have you become? I didn't do this to me. Okay, if anything, society made me this way. So, hey, quick time out. Check and see if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. If you're not, I humbly ask that you click subscribe. It's free. It doesn't sign you up for anything. What it does is it helps us keep this show free so we can just do college football year-round. All right, back to the clip. I mentioned the one model is just seed it and let's go. That happens to be the model most of you like. If unofficial, unscientific polling is any indication, most college football fans want to know how many teams are going to be in the playoff, and then after that, you don't really want much of a format. You just want 1 through 14, 1 through 16, no automatic qualifiers. Let's make sure the conference champions are in. Most of you support that, but don't just automatically give them and them alone a first-round bye. So let's just go 1 through 14, 1 through 16. That's what most of you want. I've decided that's not what I think is best. I'll take any of it. I'll have to take something, immunity, but I come down on the side that I think the automatic qualifier format is pretty substantially what will make for the best product for college football moving forward. So what that looks like, and this is a rough outline, but pretty much what it would look like is, let's say you got 14 teams. Each conference has a certain allotment of teams they know they're going to have in. SEC and Big Ten would have 4 apiece. You know, the ACC would have 2 apiece, or the Big 12 would have 2 apiece. the G5 would be guaranteed one. Notre Dame, if they're in the top 14, they're guaranteed a spot, that sort of thing. So it sounds so stupid. I used to think this idea was terrible. Some of you still think it's terrible. Let me tell you why I've come around on it. So right now, if you go with just the top 14 and you seed it straight, the SEC is not going to expand to 9 conference games. You can call them cowardly, you can call them whatever you want to. I wouldn't. If I were them, I wouldn't expand to 9 conference games for reasons I'm about to get to. Also, if you just do the straight seeding and you don't give the SEC or the Big Ten the automatic qualifier spots, the out-of-conference schedules are never going to get beefed up to the degree that they will get beefed up if we have the auto bid format or if we have the automatic qualifier format. Now, for those of you who think that sounds confusing, here's all that's happening. The SEC and the Big Ten are looking around the landscape and they're saying, we are way deeper and way more powerful than any of the rest of you. We want to expand the playoff. We actually want to include you. I'm not defending these people, mind you. I'm telling you what they're thinking. We want to include you. We want to throw you your scraps, but we invented this playoff for us. And so we want the guaranteed seats at the table. And if you give us those guaranteed seats at the table, or if you just get out of the way before we steamroll you and we get our seats at the table, then what we'll do, this is the SEC and the Big Ten talking to you, like you're 10, the SEC and the Big Ten will enter into a separate regular season out-of-conference scheduling agreement. You know, where Georgia plays versus Michigan more often, and where Texas plays versus Penn State more often, Alabama, Ohio State, etc. That will only happen in the automatic qualifier format because the thinking there is if we know we've got our 4 guaranteed spots at the table, we're not worried about our teams losing games so much anymore. We're not worried about beefing up our strength of schedule because we're not worried that a committee will look at one of our teams and say, oh, you went 9-3. We can't give you a spot. We've got to give it to 11-1 Brigham Young or something like that. They're not worried about that so much anymore. But in the straight seeding format, they would be worried about that. Therefore, they're not going to beef up the scheduling, okay? So whether you like it or not is irrelevant to the fact that that's their thinking. And so to me, the only way to get the best of both of those worlds is to go with the automatic qualifier spots. Now, there's a lot of detractors out there that have significant pushback on this. And I know what your pushback is. I hear you right now. I hear you yelling at me right now. I'm going to answer it all because I will not come with a plan without follow-ups on it. So I've got an answer for you. But the automatic qualifier thing I love is because I love the concept of the automatic qualifier. I don't love any of it. Let me rephrase. I prefer the concept of the automatic qualifiers. I prefer the concept of the SEC knows they're getting 4. The Big Ten knows they're getting 4. Big 12, ACC, they know they're getting 2 apiece. I prefer that because at that point, you're not so much worried about a committee anymore. You're not even so much worried about the playoff during the season. Your sole focus is on the conference races. And selfishly, guys, that's what I care about. I don't care about the playoff. So selfishly, if we're going to have an expanded playoff, I want whatever version of it puts off the focus on the playoff for as long as possible. And the automatic qualifier format does. Because if I know the SEC is getting 4 in, well, then I'm just paying attention to the SEC's league standings all year or the Big Ten's league standings all year. And then I've told you what my idea of it would be. You get to the finish line, and if the Big Ten knows they get 4 teams in, to me, the smartest way to go about this is take number 1 and number 2 and just give them your first 2 seats. They don't even play in a conference title game anymore. What we do with that weekend is we reimagine it, and you play 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5 in your conference standings during that Saturday as your 2 play-in games. The winners of those games take your final 2 seats. There's some other folks out there who say, well, if you're going to do it that way, why don't you just have a full-on 1 versus 8, 2 versus 6, 3 versus 5, 4 versus whatever. You get it. Well, it's because you're putting half the league in a quasi-playoff at that point, and you're well past the point of diminishing the return of the value of your conference schedule. So I'm not for that. So anyway, I'm for the automatic qualifiers, okay? If we're going this direction, I actually prefer the automatic qualifiers, but that's not the sick part. The sick part, the one where you really need to put the women and children to bed, the one where you're going to have to roll up your sleeves and just give me a second on this, is when I start listening to the detractors. Because anyone who's looking at a 14-team or a 16-team playoff and they're saying, you know what, if we're going down that road, I think the SEC and the Big Ten needing 4 teams guaranteed apiece, I think it makes sense. I love that that maintains maximum focus on the league standings in a given year. The detractors listen to that, and they say things like, but what about how imbalanced the schedules are? And I hear you, and I've got an answer for that. And the detractors say, I kind of like the chaos and the objectivity of having, a committee deciding things. I may disagree with you, but I'm willing to entertain that. I've got an idea for that. And a detractor may also say, hey, if we go the automatic qualifier route and we're just focused on the league standings, if that's really what's going to determine who gets your 4 spots, who cares about out-of-conference games? Yeah, you can tell me that Ole Miss is playing Michigan, but if they know that it's all going to come down to their league standings, well, who cares who wins that game? Isn't it a glorified exhibition game? It is if you go by league standings in a classical sense. This is where we're going to get really sadistic with this. It is my belief that in this reimagined world, where we've already thrown so much convention into the blender, you've already thrown so much tradition into the blender, who's to say anything maintains its classical definition? So if we're going into a world where the SEC has 4 guaranteed seats at the table, right? And they're playing a beefed up out-of-conference slate of games with the Big Ten, and there's 16 teams in the SEC, so Florida's schedule could be way harder than Missouri's schedule. Who's to say that the top 6 in the SEC is just the top 6 according to the conference standings? Who's to say I don't have my own subcommittee within conferences that determine that 1 through 6? Now that's an insane concept, but it's really not. It's just never been done before. But then again, we've never had the sport look like this before. The leagues are too big, guys. It's what I'm trying to say. One thing I'm trying to say. The leagues are too big. The leagues right now are such that we could be both playing in the Big Ten, and I play a schedule and you play a schedule, and you end up playing 5 top 20 teams and I play 1. Well, we're not playing 162 games. We're playing 8 or 9 conference games, and there is vast disparity in strength of schedule to the point where the top 6 may not really be the best 6. But what can I do if I'm solely going by league standings? Well, a conference rankings committee takes care of that. And I'll tell you what else they do. A conference rankings committee removes your ability to totally mail in an effort in an out-of-conference game because they are grading you on everything. That conference committee, that SEC or Big Ten conference committee is judging you just like the playoff committee would have. They're just judging you within the confines of your conference. So we get to the end of the year, and chances are your top 6 will be the same as it would have been, but there is room to maneuver. There's room to maneuver, number one, because inevitably, if you're playing 9 conference games or 8 conference games, you're going to have a ton of ties, so you'll need those settled. And I'd prefer not to go to number 6 or number 7 on the tiebreaker list down to a coin flip. I would love some informed judgment on that matter. Number 2, if you have such a disparity in strength of schedule to where one team is 1 game worse than the other, but it's blatantly obvious to everyone that, hey, the 9-3 team here, number 1, they played a much tougher league schedule than the 10-2 team. Number 2, they've got 6 quad 1 wins, and this dude has 2. And number 3, they won against Michigan and Iowa out of conference, and the 10-2 team played garbage out of conference. Well, then I want to be able to rectify that in the room. So what did we just do there? We maintained the value of out-of-conference games, because you better go try and win them, or you're going to get punished for them at the hands of your conference committee. Number 2, I made sure that there's a mechanism that accounts for the radical imbalance in conference scheduling because of how big the conferences are. And number 3, for those of you out there who actually love the subjectivity and you love the chaos and the debate from the committee every week, well, I just enhanced it tenfold because now you got it in every conference. Is it crazy? Of course it's crazy. All of this is crazy. I didn't want any of it, but I'm trying to come with answers instead of just complaining about the problems. Now, as for 2025, I know there have been some headlines this week about how the SEC, the Big Ten, they're trying to trying to maneuver and jockey for the 2025 format to get fixed, which of course it needs to be. I still doubt it will be. For the record, they need different levels of approval for that. Like they need unanimity. I almost said anonymity. They need unanimity on that in order to overhaul the 2025 format. My guess is the format remains unchanged, although we'll see. But I will say, like, there is so much intentional, disingenuous nature about the conversation around this. And it's okay. Like Jim Phillips is the ACC league commissioner. He has to look out for the ACC. I know that. I'm not ignorant. I understand what his job is. None of these commissioners are tasked with looking out for the best interest of college football right now. You're tasked with looking out for your own best interest. I know that. But when he said the other day, I don't know if we're ready to just scrap the rule that says you have to be a conference champ to get a first round bye. Because, you know, in the NFL, there's special provision for winning your division and your first round placement. It's so intellectually bankrupt for a number of reasons, but the chief of which is college football compared to the NFL is apples to bowling balls right now. And I'm going to do a little exercise later in the show that illustrates that, but if you can't watch the Big Ten and then watch the Big 12, if you can't watch the SEC, then watch the ACC, and not understand that this is a little different than watching the NFC East and the NFC North, I don't know what to tell you. Jim Phillips knows that. If Jim Phillips were the commissioner of the SEC, he'd be making the exact opposite point. If Jim Phillips were in Greg Sankey's shoes and vice versa, Sankey would be the one yelling about fairness and inclusion and everyone should have a shot and we got to value conference champs. And Jim Phillips would be the one saying, "Fool, be happy we're even letting you in this door." So I get what everyone's job here is. I'll just say this. I'll be pleasantly surprised if they adjust the format for 2025. No, of course it's dumb for you to be required to win a conference championship to have a first-round bye. Of course it's dumb. But that's the way it was this last year. That's the way it will be at least one more year. I think that's the way it will be for one more year. And if I'm wrong there, I don't have guided information on this. It's just my feeling that the last remaining seconds of power and influence that entities like the ACC or the Mountain West have, they're going to use, they're going to exert, because that time is quickly coming to an end.